Hi everyone, welcome to the IMS Business Report 2021. We're going to look back at 2020, see what happened, and learn lessons that we can all use to make our sector stronger. And we're going to end with the IMS valuation of the size of the electronic music industry. Let's get started. The overall conclusion, looking back at all this time, has got to be one about devastation. So much of our sector was, and there's no better word, devastated by what happened in the pandemic. But there are inspiring lessons dotted throughout this report of brilliant innovation. People struggled and found ways to do new, exciting things that should sustain in the future. And hence the big challenge that we're labeling this report with, that was the easy part. In many ways, that innovation was the easy part. How are we going to sustain it when we're back in a world of parties and clubs? We're going to go through the conclusions now in the next 30 minutes, but also let me advise you, please go download the full version of the report. It contains 97 pages of awesome insight, stories, and lessons from more than 22 interviews with industry leaders across our sector and more than 35 data sets, many of which are exclusive to IMS, or the analysis is exclusive to IMS. Go, it's gold, get the report. In the meantime, let's walk through the main conclusions right now. We'll start with recorded music. Our conclusion is about hip hop? What? Let me explain. Hip hop, we think, is plateauing. I'll explain why that's so important. The main reason being, because it's time to build, it's time for dance music to take center stage once again. And now we've got to get our ducks in a row to be ready for that moment. Let me show you why I think that's the big conclusion and why that's what we need to act on. This quote from Anton at Warner's sums up the whole section for me brilliantly. Hip hop is coming out 4 or 5 years where it is far more exciting and relevant. Every 3 or 4 years, though, a generation finds something that's fresh and exciting to them. That's electronic music right now. Right, let's walk through the data and see if we agree. First, we're going to look at market share, and we'll start with Germany. German market share for dance music has been stable but growing for a long time now. Rapid growth 2014-15, and then steady and consistent growth year on year since then. Wolfgang at Sony says that's a lot to do with commercial radio recognizing dance music as one of the primary drivers. Good work, Germany. But let's look at hip hop in Germany. It started off at lower levels, but similar levels. Also experienced that rapid growth 2014-2015, but has continued that growth and accelerated that growth in recent years. Crazy growth. Awesome and inspiring. Lots we can learn. We'll come on to that soon. Let's take a look at the US though. Biggest market there is. Stable, significant, stable market share over time. Slight decline year on year, 2019 to 2020. That will become important when we get to the valuation shortly. But overall, a story of stability. Let's look at hip hop. Of course, it was always more culturally relevant in the US than in other countries. It started from a higher base, but it also has this rapid growth in recent years. Looks like it's flattening off. And let's look at the UK, a huge lead relative to the US and Germany in dance market share, up at 15.4% at the start of this period, but a decline year on year around 16, 17, 18, still declining but slowing down. Let's look at hip hop, started from a lower base in the UK, but in almost a mirror image of what happened in dance music, it's accelerated as we've declined, and it's also plateauing. So hip hop, slight decline in Germany, flattening in the US, flattening in the UK. Dance music, lots of decline except for Germany, good work Germany, and starting to flatten off. Those curves are going to cross again. It's our time in the spotlight, get ready. To better understand the time periods of change and the countries of change, we've done some exclusive analysis looking at Spotify's top 200 songs, and dance music's share of those top 200 has been declining over the last couple of years in 17 out of the 18 countries we've looked at. I'm not going to tell you what the 18th country is. Open the report, find it yourself. It's a good story. 17 out of 18, though, decline in dance market share. Well worth a look through this data to see which countries are up and down, the relative performance of dance versus hip hop. Awesome data. But it exaggerates the trend that we've seen in the market share data. So something's going on. Dance is declining, but flattening. Time for our moment in the sun. Let's look at share, not just of Spotify, not just of market share, but let's look at share of social. Why? Because Goldman Sachs says we expect an increase in the importance of social media for music discovery and promotion. If we're going to shift market share, we've got to shift share of social. Let's take a look. Dance music's market share, share of social, across lots of different platforms, really high for SoundCloud, no surprise there. But across other social or music sites, much lower market share. Let's get some context. What does that look like for hip hop? We are not winning the market share battle in music. We're not winning it in social, though. And this provides one of the clues as a driver of music that we're losing the market share in social. We've spoke to a bunch of experts to better understand that. Here's some quotes. In a world of abundance, we've gravitated towards celebs who come with character, fashion, and culture. Hip hop, of course, is full of them. Electronic music, not so much. Here's another quote. Electronic music has traditionally been very faceless. Artists and household names can be counted on a couple of hands. Finally, there are lots of young people who have sat in their bedroom trying to be deadmau5 that are now sitting in their bedroom trying to be Lil Nas X, or trying to be the guy that delivered the beats for Lil Nas X. Says Bart, who you're going to hear from in a minute on the panel. Ask him about that. But social matters. Artists who are rounded matter, and it drives market share. Our time for growth is coming. One way we can capitalize on that opportunity is to support, find, engage more rounded artists. They might be artists that challenge us, that are different from us. Might not be the usual kind of artists we work with, but stretching ourselves outside of our comfort zone to find and support artists who are more rounded like this is one of the big opportunities we face. Now's our time. It's a huge opportunity. And as I say, it's not just the numbers and the flattening of dance, the cresting of the wave of hip hop that makes me think our time is coming. Talking to a bunch of people in the industry, you can feel the buzz of energy around growth that's starting. There are so many different signs. Let me show you some of the ones that I've picked up in preparing for this report. First, here's Anton again at Warner. We're seeing growth even without clubs and festivals to give tracks context, which is remarkable. Remember, in the past, often tracks had 6 or 8 months of wind in their sails from clubs before they became hits. So finding hits without that, remarkable sign that culture's ready for us. What else are we seeing? Signs of growth from lots of places. And of course, you always see growth before it manifests itself in the numbers if you're at the cutting edge. That's why we've spoken to all these people. Beatport sales up 33%, despite download sales overall, all genres, down 16%. Remarkable achievement and a sign that this vibrancy and energy in our scene, growth, is starting. The majors, staffing up for growth, recognizing that cultural nuances from our sector are important in staffing up. Look at content investment. Warner's $100 million acquisition of David Guetta's catalogue. There's something else to ask Bart about in a moment. And then you've got signs from fashion where runway shows are picking up dance music as their soundtrack. Really interesting innovations in business models around curated travel, around education, and then wellness, acoustic and ambient stuff. Check out Endel, the app. It's awesome. Innovative ways of getting electronic music to people and for people to engage in electronic music. So many signs that culture is picking up on this buzz and that our time is now. Let's dig into our scene now. Let's look at Beatport charts. Inside Beatport, we see what's going on in our scene and techno. Look, the 5th year in a row where techno is dominating the Beatport charts. What else do we see? House continues to expand its share, rising to the 2nd most popular genre in 2020. Drum and bass continued to grow, now the 4th biggest genre that they're seeing. And then the newly created dance electropop genre, already in the top 10, coming in at 8th position. growth? What does it look like? What genres, what artists are coming through? Let's take a look at festivals and clubs next. I really struggled with this section. I'm going to be honest with you. I struggled because it's really just a story of sadness and devastation. I didn't want to call it that, so I've called it something slightly more optimistic. Let's go with the fallow year, a chance to rest and a chance to come back stronger and more vibrant. Let's look for signs of that. But first, let's celebrate or recognize the devastation that happened. Take a moment to think about the festivals that were cancelled over the last year. This is a list we put together of every one we could find. More than 200 electronic music festivals cancelled or postponed. Hundreds of thousands of people out of work. Just think about the artists that didn't perform their craft. Think about the audiences that didn't engage in their culture. Billions of dollars, contributions to local economies, wiped out. Think about clubs. We took a look at Ibiza search demand in the UK. It's interesting to note the year-on-year trend of this, by the way, but very regular pattern. So we put together a forecast of what should have happened, the dotted line, over the last 18 months. The solid line, what did happen, tragedy. Enthusiasm, cut down. Enthusiasm, cut down. And this year, no searches. There is optimism though. Many clubs gave their space up for good causes during the pandemic. Here we've got blood donation, we've got food banks, and we've got vaccination centres in clubs. And there's some positive optimism around what's next, and an important call to action to get our sector open as well. First, if you look at test events, transmission rates are pretty favourable compared to the base rates. These can be done safely if we're smart about it. That's good evidence to use. People want to open up. Data from Skiddle is incredibly encouraging. Festival tickets sold up 123% March to May versus the same period pre-pandemic. Some crazy stats here. Also, in terms of a call to action, our effectiveness at lobbying is going to improve if we're better able to articulate what it is about the cultural impact, as well as the economic impact of our actions that makes them so important. The better we are able to tell a story about the role we play in people's lives, the scale of that role, and its impact on communities and society, the better we'll be respected and supported in opening up. We've got a lot more work to do to create that bank of evidence. Let's look at one of the hottest topics of the year then, live streaming. Our conclusion, there's 3 ways that live streaming can really work: enroll, engage, and excite. We're going to show you some numbers and we're going to show you examples of what those 3 things mean. First, on the numbers, this is total Twitch streams for all music category streams. And just look at what happened during the pandemic. An absolute explosion in engagement and usage of the platform. This shows that live streaming really took off in 2020. And finally, the electronic music industry embraced it. The question though, is live streaming about expanding your audience, reaching new fans, or is it about engaging your audience, exploiting existing fans? Well, that question got us thinking, and we came up with these 3 pillars I mentioned of live streaming: enrolling your audience, getting them signed up, getting their information for indirect monetization. Second, engaging your audience and monetizing them in the moment. And third, knock it out of the park at live streams that excite your audience and are monetized much more directly. Let's show you examples of these 3 pillars. First, enrolling your audience. YouTube subscribers for Defected and Beatport really accelerated, showing that you can get new fans this way. Here's Defected, and the dotted line, our forecast, what would have happened if we carried on. The solid line, actual, what did happen, 140,000 more subscribers than expected, thank you to the pandemic. Beatport, again, similar story, different graph. Dotted line is what we expected to see. Solid line, actual 106,000 more subscribers than expected. The key lesson, yes, you can drive subscribers if you're driving to enrollment. If you're doing live streams, drive to enrollment, get people to sign up. Let's look at pillar 2, We use Twitch as an example of pillar 2. Just look at the top dance music Twitch accounts and their growth pre-pandemic, almost nothing going on. A few trailblazers. Pandemic, huge growth, but not big numbers compared to other live streams. Let's look at that first quote. I wouldn't have a job now if it wasn't for Twitch. Disclosure has 30,000 followers, our lowest number on any platform, but our engagement rate is the highest. Twitch people stay for 8 hours. It's probably the most connected we've felt to our fans ever. Small but perfectly formed audience. The other quote, Twitch is a cross between MTV and a Vegas slot machine. Addictive all-day entertainment you can keep putting your money into with a community attached. Awesome quote, really brings to life what Twitch is. Very different from YouTube, like we say. Let's look at pillar 3, exciting your audience. And there are so many knockout successes, great stories that we're told. We've chosen 3 to really illustrate how you can do this exciting pillar. First, let's look at Dua Lipa Studio 2054, which was extravagant and captivating as the main hook. Success, more tickets than a world tour. Let's look at Pete Tong's Oh Come All Ye Ravers. Uplifting and joyful was the hook for this one, and more tickets than the O2 capacity. Success there. And look at Bicep's live global stream 2, one of my favorites from this period. Pure and simple is the driver of that success. More tickets than if they played that night in a super club. There's lots of different ways of looking at success, but knock it out of the park examples of spectacles that couldn't or are unlikely to be experienced in the real world. The lesson, have a strong reason or a strong theme and make it memorable, whichever your reason is. It doesn't have to be one of these. Make it memorable. And while we've focused on accessible platforms and exciting use cases in those case studies, a note about making sure artists get paid. There's more we can all do to push for this. It's about getting and it's about giving. In terms of getting rights, we all need to put pressure on platforms. Here's 2 people putting some pressure on platforms. Jules O'Riordan, aka Judge Jules. I find it almost repulsive that social media companies will leave up foul, racist, misogynist, and otherwise abusive content, but will tear down live streams at a moment's notice. Sort it out, get licenses, he says. Here's a quote I got from a head of marketing at a dance label. Did not want to be identified for the report, which tells you something. Twitch should pull their finger out. They've got enough money and enough data. They should be able to get the licenses. So guys, let's put pressure on the platforms to get licenses, but also let's put pressure on labels to give licenses. Here's a quote about how labels haven't been as flexible as they could have been, saying the mechanism often wasn't there for an artist to get paid. Why? Because the licenses are complex. Come on, labels, do your best, be flexible, help this situation. So getting and giving rights, critical. And it's okay to use these platforms and engage audiences, but we've got to work towards rights. Next, let's look at engaging fans, new technologies, major breakthroughs. And back in 2008, Kevin Kelly, who is editor of Wired magazine, said, hey, don't worry, if you have 1,000 true fans, you can live a good career. You can monetize your career well as an artist. That always seemed very hard to do in practice. I think looking at 2020, 2021, this has finally come true. Here's what we found. First, gotta look at NFTs. Non-fungible tokens of data on a digital ledger that certifies a digital asset to be unique and therefore not interchangeable. Wonderful, thank you. What happened? Well, let's look at the numbers. First, you notice almost nothing happened in terms of NFTs in 2020. This is a 2021 story, very much so. And then in 2021, just look at the orange bar. That's us, it's electronic music, pioneering the use of NFTs. 76% of all music NFT issues worth $50.2 million were issued by electronic artists. Really pioneering this use case, mostly around digital collectibles. The point being that digital collectibles allow exclusivity and price discrimination, which is what the video game industry has done so well in terms of their monetization for a long time. And it's starting to enable artists, electronic artists, to capitalize on those 2 things as well. But that's not the biggest story in NFTs. The biggest story is that the real use cases have not been found yet. And we've got to get stuck in, try, experiment, and explore to try and find them. This didn't exist 8 months ago. We need to push as many use cases as we can to learn. We don't even know what all the uses are yet. Get involved, get engaged, try it out. The blockchain offers the promise of a transparent way to get paid instantly and every time when your content is streamed. Just think about that as a promise. It would revolutionize our industry. It's one of many ways that the future of blockchain is much more exciting than even the $50.2 million that we've seen in the last 18 months. Another method of engaging fans, Patreon, which was around for a long time, but really soared during 2020. Look at Bill Brewster's numbers on Patreon and his huge rise during the pandemic. We talked to Bill to better understand what this is, how it works, and what lessons we can all learn from his experience. So here's 4 lessons. First, it's about community of like-minded people coming together around similar interests. Not a broadcast medium, a community. Second, it's about focus. Know what you have that's special. Bill worked it out and built his Patreon around that. Yours will be different. What do you have that's special? Third, don't be shy. Bill says, I've always been slightly embarrassed about the self-promotion aspect, but you know what? No one batted an eyelid. The response was amazing. Don't be shy. I bet that's holding a lot of you back. Open up, engage. People won't bat an eyelid. They'll love it. Finally, consistency. Tracks every day, shows every week like clockwork. Bill's Patreon got me through the pandemic. Try it out if you haven't, and think about what you've got, how yours might work. Next, let's look at gaming. No, not gaming. Let's look at the metaverse. Because it's not about gaming. It's about the universe where people hang out. We'll talk about that. The metaverse, the collection of digital spaces in which users can interact with a computer-generated environment and other users. Thank you very much. Our conclusion, it's time to play, get involved. Why? First, it's huge. The video game industry is more than 20 times the size of the electronic music industry and growing rapidly. Labels are investing and seeing returns. Most importantly though, it's where the kids are. Even before 5G, VR and AR and all the promise they bring, even before that, the digital world is as real to kids as the physical world is to us. As a parent of 2 kids, I can tell you this is definitely true. They want digital merch, not IRL presents, and they favor in-game events over going out. Think about that. Think about the implications for being present in the lives of the next generation. Get involved. The metaverse is not about gaming. It's where people hang out, be there. And we have only scratched the surface of what's possible. If you look at Travis Scott and Fortnite, epic engagement, epic concert tour, whatever you call it, preceded by electronic artists, followed by electronic artists, an awesome way of doing it, but only one. Look at Circa Loco, Rockstar Games partnership, another interesting way of being in the lives of this generation. Look at the Sandbox, a decentralized virtual world that deadmau5 and Richie Hawtin are deeply involved in. Another way, there are many more. And let's look at a quick example. This is a virtual gig, DJ, fans, and through the lens of webcams, you get to feel like you're really there while you move around the space. This might not be for you. This might not be your taste, but the quote on the right brings it to life perfectly for me. The next generation of musicians and music executives will have grown up with the metaverse. They will not see it as weird or strange, and they will be coming up with all kinds of inventive ideas for how music fits into these spaces. Go join them, go compete with them, or leave it to them, it's up to you. But this will happen. Get involved, time to play. Next, let's look at good causes. And there was so much activity by our industry in this area over the last 18 months. True therapy for those in isolation. First, live streams. Huge number of live streams, huge resources and effort devoted, not for the benefit of making up for missed DJ fees, but for making the world a better place. Whether it's buying PPE or feeding people, millions and millions of dollars raised, Livestream records, and impact all around the world, from local communities to global initiatives. Tremendous investment in time and effort, not just uplifting people, but genuinely making a difference in their life. Let's look at albums that were released. This, from my personal collection, Bandcamp albums that I bought that donate money to artists struggling, or PPE, buy PPE for nurses, or raise money for non-profits. Tremendous contributions. We spoke to one producer who created this album. The story is amazing. 56 tracks of awesome electronic music, which he got into the top 5 of Bandcamp's overall ranking. Quite an achievement. Raised a good sum for charity, but told the story of the pandemic. Music created from inside lockdown rooms, looking through these very windows, which form the artwork to the album. And he told me a story of how he had to leave his apartment in the middle of night in Italy, deep in the middle of lockdown, to sneak into his studio, where he then stayed for days on end to mix and master the compilation. Just another story of the sweat and passion that's gone into helping each other during this pandemic, helping audiences, and helping non-profits and charities around the world. We did so much. Electronic music helped people to feel together when we had to be kept apart. We raised record amounts for good causes in 2020. My question, my challenge, the big opportunity: how do we keep that going when we're back to a world of parties and dance floors? Next, let's look at diversity. Breaking new ground, which we certainly did, but with tremendous challenge and opportunity still to come in this space. First, on the topic of race, electronic music soundtracked and supported racial justice over the last 18 months. Many electronic artists, labels, and clubs and festivals came out strongly in support of Black Lives Matter. However, now, 12 months on, we must all ask ourselves if we've done everything we can to go beyond soundtracking and supporting to actually delivering on the promise of racial justice. 12 months later, are we hiring, booking, doing A&R, and promoting differently? Ask yourselves that. On race, let's take a look at some numbers. We want to be able to measure progress here. We took the DJ Mag Top 100 and we looked at the Google search volume over time for different lists and in different countries. Here's what we found: a positive and encouraging trend. Progress is being made in general. Take a look at 2017 and the full report to better understand some nuances. But progress is being made. It's slowing down though. It's not accelerating. Although this is pre-Black Lives Matter, pre the commitments to change. Let's see next year what happens. It has been slowing down though, and in some countries it's not going as fast as it should be. So good measurement, good progress, but room to improve. Let's look at gender. We did the same analysis, but for the top 100 DJs, looking at female DJs in that list. We see more rapid progress, particularly in some countries, but the same message: overall low levels, and therefore a big opportunity, and a very big opportunity in some countries to promote, support, and drive demand for female DJs. Let's take a look at countries where representation of dance music is growing, where we're driving new audiences. Brazil, Mexico, showing huge increases and driving the increase globally in electronic music consumption and demand. And then let's take a look at Saudi Arabia. In a country where popular music was outlawed for so long, a number of artists are working to legitimize DJing and dancing. Not without controversy. We spoke to a number of people involved and in Saudi, and here's what we found. This quote sums up the feeling from the DJs that played, the Saudi DJs particularly. DJing has been around underground behind closed doors, but today you can choose to actually be an artist and make a decent living out of it. As one Saudi DJ and music producer who performed at the festival told us. And here's a quote from a young woman in Jeddah. I felt like I belonged a little bit. I don't think in Saudi Arabia I ever felt like I belonged. Genuinely moving people, genuinely inspiring people to take up the art form that we love so much. But with good economic implications as well. Artists that performed at the festival still had 36.5% more demand for them relative to artists that didn't perform, even 12 months later. So pioneering dancing and DJing in this country, but also driving fan bases and audiences that will sustain. Finally, let's take a look at the valuation. Let's sum all of this up into some hard numbers. Clearly it's down, but very much not out. If you look back at all the previous IMS valuations, you see tremendous growth and then a period of real consistency. Well, until 2019, of course. No surprise to estimate what's going to happen in 2020, but let's walk through that piece by piece. First, if we break 2019 down into its component parts, you see that clubs and festivals, DJ and artist earnings were the biggest sections of the valuation. You know what's going to happen to those in a minute, don't you? Clubs and festivals, we estimate to be down $3.4 billion. 78% of the value of clubs and festivals wiped out in 1 year. Temporarily, of course, but still. On DJ and artist earnings, we estimate them to be down $743 million. That's 68% loss of value in that one category alone. Again, think about those charity live streams that were raising money not for artists, but directly, but for audiences, beneficiaries. Now, two pieces of evaluation which were thoroughly decimated during this difficult time. But that's not the full story. Music sales and streaming are up $48 million, up 4% year on year to a record high, broke $1 billion for the first time. So two stories of decimation, one of a record high, two record highs, software and hardware, DJ software and hardware up $203 million is our estimate, up 23% year on year as hobbyists entered the market or beefed up their systems. So all in all, the pandemic has temporarily set back our industry to $3.4 billion, a size last seen more than a decade ago. But under the surface, really mixed messages. Parts of our community who are thriving and seeing record highs, and parts of our community who have been thoroughly decimated by this, much like the story of the pandemic overall, as some thrived and some suffered. That's our report for this year. From devastation comes innovation. You've seen all that innovation. You've seen that devastation. And again, that's the easy part. How do we keep up that innovation in a world where we're back to dance floors and parties? I want to again remind you to go download the full report, 97 pages, 22 interviews, 35 data sets. It is gold. Go get it. And if you want to help shape our future reports, please get in touch. I'm happy to present this to your team to debate the conclusions as it relates to your business. Now, let's see what the panel had to say about this, shall we? Thank you so much.
Hello, everyone. I'm Katie Bain. I'm the director of Billboard Dance. And thanks to all of you out there who are watching us, and thanks to David for his fascinating and I think optimistic report. I'm here along with our panelists to really dig into it. And so I'd like to start by introducing them. We've got Bart Cools, the Executive Vice President of Global A&R and Marketing for Dance Music at Warner Music. We've got Mark Lawrence, the Director of Electronic Music at Sentric Music, and Beatport's Director of Industry Relations, Susan Gloy-Kruse. And so before we get into our discussion, if you have answers out there in the audience, we want to answer them. And so if you're watching on Twitch, you can enter those questions via the chat. And if you're watching on Facebook, you can drop your questions into the comment section. to get started with you guys. So David talked quite a bit about how hip hop is looking like it's plateauing and dance music is in potentially a good position to sort of slide back into the top spot in terms of mainstream popularity. I want to talk to you all and get your ideas about how we would do that. Mark, why don't we start with you?
Well, I think what's been interesting through the sort of the enforced removal of the live scene throughout 2020 is what we've seen is a different form of creativity. Instead of the kind of 2-week cycle of making music to be released, to be in the shop windows, a business card for gigs, a lot of artists and producers and creators have taken time to work on types of music they wouldn't necessarily record or write. So more down tempo, more elaborate, more vocal, more song based. And so I think that what that will naturally lean to is greater radio play, more use of electronic music and film, TV and sync. And so it will find new audiences through its new styles and its new formats, I think. So certainly from our side on the publishing side, we see a very rich and diverse electronic music scene emerging as live re-emerges with a greater depth and breadth of talent and style.
That's interesting. Susan, is that parallel to what you're seeing over in your position?
Yeah, definitely. So everyone is really hungry for live music coming back. And so the demand of electronic music we see in our numbers is increasing, which is really, really great. And what you can definitely see as well, generally speaking, is that you listen to way more electronic music now on TV ads and all around. The interest in electronic music is really, really big. And then once live events come back, I think this will definitely go through the roof.
Sure. Bart, what are your thoughts on this one?
Well, I think I do think that David in his report actually sort of the whole hip hop against dance or electronic dance, that's not how we or I see it. It's like, I think dance music has been strong, obviously sort of coming off a massive high 4, 5, 6 years ago, and then sort of now gone back to its normal level, if you like. But at the same time, it's so much more accepted and it's so much more widely spread through geographic expansion as well. It's like what we see is like sort of the effect of dance music into India or China, or sort of like South America now as well, Brazil. It's like the explosion there is quite fresh and refreshing as well. So like I think the amount of talent that can come out of sort of lesser explored regions, if you like, is very hopeful for all of us. And what I also believe is that the sort of international feel of dance, like the difference between like the massive peak in hip hop, like particularly in France, German, Italian hip hop, they're all obviously mainly local languages hip hop artists, and for us on the label side, major label side, it's like that is hugely important, and there's people working on that. But if you look at sort of where you get like the huge international tracks, then I really still think that like dance is the first place to go to actually get tracks that sort of have, where it doesn't really matter too much where they come from. You can have a massive Russian global hit with a dance record. It's a little bit more difficult to do that with a Russian hip hop record.
Sure, that makes sense. And in terms of sort of regaining its position from previous years, do you think that's even an expectation or a desire? Like, is anyone thinking, okay, dance music is going to return to the level that we was at in 2016? Is anyone even trying to do that?
I don't know. I don't really look at it like as in a sort of a sports terms. It's like, it's not about who's 1 and 2. It's like, it's just like from where I'm sitting and the labels and music that I oversee, it's been steadily growing in the last years. I mean, admittedly at a slower pace than like 4 or 5 years ago. And what we see now is like, or what we feel now is that we think there's going to be a swing back towards that sort of dance music in all its genres. It's like from pop dance to tech house to techno, and it's like particularly also with live music or live shows coming back. I don't really see that as a competition between genres. It's just like we do what we need to do to actually work with the artists that we want to work with, and we predict that there's going to be growth, so we're staffing up and we're buying into sort of markets that we don't have yet, and that is not just growth as the genre globally, but also because obviously we're going into new markets and there's new platforms coming on board. I mean, sort of anything that's happening on Peloton is sort of more it's like that's a big account for us now, like particularly for the sort of specialist dance labels. That is where it's at.
To add from a Beatport group perspective, we obviously, invest in both the electronic music part with Beatport, and then with BeatSource, we really tailor the offer towards hip hop. So we think both genres are definitely, high in demand. So we have the dedicated services for both.
Yeah, and I think as well, it's interesting to look from maybe 30,000 feet up, because where once it was easy to draw a line in the genre sand and say this is dance music, this isn't. Now, if you stroll down the commercial top 10, there are tracks there that are, you might not be hearing them in underground club, but the format, structure, and sounds are electronic music, and they're probably falling outside of these numbers, and they're in pop music, which is the biggest sign of success you can probably attach to electronic music. Is it's gone so mainstream it doesn't even fall in the numbers anymore. So are any of Joel Corry's releases in the numbers, for instance? Because that is, in a way, a kind of a real pat on the back for electronic music and how it's commercialized and gone mainstream. But at the same time, I think kind of what's emerging out from underneath that mainstream, I guess, the mainstream always needs an underground to fight against it, to keep refreshing electronic music. And it's once again becoming rebellion music. You're seeing marches in major cities accompanied by electronic music. Techno has found its voice once more as a music of rebellion. So I think what we'll see is a resurgent underground come out over the next 12 months that will find slightly new flavors of electronic music than those that came into 2020. And I think you'll start seeing them rise up on Beatport fairly quickly. And like we've all said, as soon as the pop of the bottle of the live sector returning, you'll see genres like drum and bass just lift, because they're such explosive genres to be at a festival to or to an event to. That release will create some resurgence there as well, I think. So I think, like everybody on this session, are extremely confident about what's coming. I think it's going to be a really revitalized electronic music scene in general. But I think there's going to be some really surprising subgenres sort of emerge out of it that have been formulating behind closed doors for the last 18 months.
Sure. An artist said to me a few weeks ago that because of artists' necessity to sort of rely on streaming during the last 15, 16 months, artists have been sort of playing a little bit safer in terms of releases and releasing music that they know will stream well. And in the next few months, as things reopen, we are, probably about to see music that's a little bit weirder. Do you think that tracks?
Yeah.
Possibly. Let's hope so.
And from each of your perspective, positions, obviously this is a really singular moment for the dance music industry as things reopen. What are you each doing to sort of, be prepared for what is about to happen and sort of what is starting to happen?
I can speak from a Sentric perspective, which is we went into 2020 with a very clear plan to invest in electronic music, to invest in new talent, to invest in new music and creativity. And when kind of the lockdowns hit, we had no desire to change plan, because we saw everything as a short-term problem, really, if you like. We weren't seeing it as any cause to panic. So we maintained our confidence, which is to invest. I think we invested something like 750,000 euros into the underground in 2020. We built and attached a creative division into electronic music specifically, so that we could invest in artists emerging and existing, into creative projects, into new music, so that whilst a lot of that we were going to do anyway, in some ways we accelerated that, because everyone who was not gigging was looking for an outlet for their creativity, and we were able to make a home for that. So in some ways, our preparedness was already there by doing what we did in 2020, because that investment into artists and that investment into resource and that kind of the inspiration, I guess, that we enabled in our writers and our producers will now kind of flourish in 21, 22. Fingers crossed.
Got it. Susan, Bart, anything you want to add there?
Yeah, so same here. We always, believe and invested in innovation and community. And I mean, the community aspect was, I think, the most important one to get through this pandemic together. So, we speak about live streaming, I'm sure, a bit later as well, but that was a huge success for us, and how to connect the community to, still bring people back together. And our strategy around our products, which is, going into streaming for DJs as well with our link ecosystem, this was the innovation that we could release throughout the pandemic, and even got people who were interested in electronic music, interested in perhaps doing their first ever mixes, get into the game with, a web-based DJ application, and just recently a mobile app. So we continue to, innovate and build the community. And definitely what we're doing right now is looking into which festivals are going to happen, which brands can we include for this together to really be prepared when the big events are back, that we can stream some of those, but obviously be on site as well.
Great.
I think the same sort of from Warner's perspective is like we've been investing in dance music for years now, sort of buying into spinning records, setting up a new label in China recently. It's called Wet Records. So it's both on the sort of the depth of the catalog that we want to have and artists that we want to work with, but also geographically to make sure that we have feet on the ground to actually service those deals and make sure that we sort of don't drop the ball, once the music is out. And the sort of the structure of major labels at the moment is like where you can actually, through distribution services like ADA, offer label services or distribution services, label services, proper license deals up to artist deals. So everything on the spectrum basically gets invested in, gets looked at, and gets serviced, and sort of make sure that we can sort of have global support structure to make sure that is what it is. It's like it is sort of a global genre at the moment. Always was actually, but it's like it's so much more visible than it is. With the first hits coming out of Africa, hopefully soon also out of China and India and Brazil. It has already got that moment now. So it all that means that sort of the vibe on dance music within labels is very, very positive.
Got it. And you perhaps just answered it, but I know during the report, David mentioned Canada and Germany as areas that in particular contributed to the growth of dance music's global market share. I mean, what is happening there that, isn't happening anywhere else? And then what other territories do you guys have your eyes on?
Well, I can talk to Germany, because like what happens there is that dance music, or maybe what some people would more describe pop dance, Joe Corey, Robin Schulz, David Guetta, is everywhere. It's like if you look at the German airplay charts, it's like I think the last time I looked, or even the European airplay charts, is like a third of the top 50 airplay tracks in Europe are dance records. I mean, not techno records, but pop dance records, like sort of with sort of what we would still qualify as electronic or dance music. So it is a big chunk of what's going on in media. There's a lot of talent there. There's a lot of talent that's actually been picked up and signed and developed. So it's like there is just a lot of buzz. So that is sort of what makes the market so healthy.
That makes sense. Mark and Susan, in terms of that or places you're watching, what would you like to add?
Yeah, so just echoing what Bart just said, I'm dialing in from Germany. And yes, if you tune into the radio, you hear a lot of dance music, that's for sure. And when you come to Berlin, the hub of our club scene, there you have even the underground radio shows that are very, very popular as well. So that's definitely this. But when it comes to, new markets that we want to go to, it's actually a project I'm working on right now. And, some country names already were mentioned. So, of course, it's good to see and look into the Indian market, the African market, Russian market as well. Probably, some areas in Asia. So definitely, we have an eye on what's going on there and how we can, better be present in these regions to support the growth of the community there as well.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, isn't it, to look at some of those territories you mentioned, like Canada, where these kind of growing hubs of innovative new electronic music. I was at the Alberta Electronic Music Conference just at the end of 2019, and everyone, not everybody, that's an exaggeration, but a lot of the people making the music and performing the music and at the conference and being there to attend were under 30s, a very, very different energy and a very different outlook. And for my sins, I've probably been to most of the conferences around the world, and there's a certain profile of people that attend in some of the more long in the tooth conferences or longer standing conferences like ADE and IMS in Ibiza, where they're important deal making networking events. And then when you go out to some of the new ones, like you go out to IMS in Malta or you go to Alberta in Canada, you see something totally different. And you see that like the kind of the next wave. And so I think Brazil is always interesting as well for that reason. And there's some really, really exciting talent coming out of Brazil. And I think it's like Bart said, the music itself is without language. And very often you don't need a lot of language to make a track very, very successful. They export brilliantly. So a number of things have happened. You've got these emerging territories that have grabbed hold of technology without history. And of course, everybody, you kind of, laughingly look at some businesses that are ready made for lockdown because they're already working from home. Well, if there was a business that was already ready made for lockdown, it's electronic music producers sat in front of laptops. I think kind of put all those together, and you really have got, as I think we've all said, an exciting couple of years ahead in terms of what's coming, and it's coming from everywhere.
Got it. That's good to know, and yeah, very exciting. I think that something that's been on everybody's minds with the lockdown and with live streams is this sort of tension between platforms, streaming, and labels. It's a huge issue. What do you guys think needs to happen in order for everyone to sort of get this sorted and have legally licensed music?
More business affairs people working on it, maybe. I don't know. It's like, it's not that's not the sort of part of the business that I'm sort of very involved in, so I can't really comment on that. But like, if there is a platform there using music, then we do all we can to actually license them or to come to some sort of deal with them, so it gets all monetized, if you like, or people get the money they deserve. Not always easy, but it's work in progress.
Yeah, I agree. I think there needs to be a slightly increased level of pragmatism in the industry around deal making, which is understand that the first deal that you get might not be the last deal you get, and see it as steps. And I think all too often some of the big negotiating groups kind of go in with their size 15s on right at the beginning of a services life and sort of kick the life out of it all too soon. But at the same time, very large companies launching new and emerging services need to get to grips with the fact that they're using people's content and their content needs to be paid for. So, but a lot of us can probably sit here being fairly conflicted about the different streaming services that we've used or used for audience growth or have got our content or our voices or our heads on at any one point in time over the last 18 months. I think the key thing is, support organizations like the Association for Electronic Music. They're trying to make some kind of standards in the industry around streaming services and pull performing right organizations together and say, can we all act as one and give services life, but at the same time give people money?
Yeah, I totally agree, because in the end we all want the same. So even though it's not my area of expertise, but I think transparency and just coming together and finding a solution. That's it. And what Mark said, the Association for Electronic Music could really be a good mediator for this.
And in terms of, the narrative around royalties this year, was that it, or are there other, obviously there's a big problem with sort of unpaid royalties and, artists not getting the money that they've earned. What was the big narrative with royalties this past year?
As far as I know, we pay all the royalties we have to pay. It's like I don't really. What are you alluding to? It's like, because that's a bit unclear to me.
Well, I know that Mark and I have spoken in the past about with live streams and live sets, for example, there's an issue of sort of money being paid out that doesn't actually land with the artist that has earned it because it's not tracked properly. Mark, are you seeing sort of any headway in that area?
Yeah, I think it's been a huge amount of work to get accurate music recognition technology on radio, on streams, on all of the services. A whole industry has sprung up in music recognition technology over the last 3 or 4 years, and it's just such a shame that of course so much of that was focused on live events, and just when everything seemed to be coming together to accurately identify music to pay people when their music was played, the world came to a standstill. But that means that at the same time, all of those companies have been looking around at other places to put their digital ears to, and those digital ears have been listening to streams and helping companies like publishers and performing right organizations identify it. So I think there's a huge amount of progress being made, but what that was always going to do was shine a light on the level of royalties. So when you understand that you've been played somewhere, then you understand how much you've been paid from somewhere. And I guess that's the second wave of the discussion over the next few years, is now I know where my music is, and now I know how much I'm getting paid. People will determine whether or not they're happy with that amount.
Sure. I mean, and we could list that in sort of things that have the potential to change as clubs open their doors again and festivals open their gates. I mean, do you see sort of the way that these places operate on sort of a functional level changing in any way post-pandemic, or is it just a matter of turning the lights back on and opening the gates and everything's going to be sort of business as normal?
I don't think it's going to be business as normal for a while. I mean, we work with a lot of partners in DJs and agents and managers, and I think everyone is increasingly confident and hopeful, but also fearful of outbreaks of infection, and the fact that they can't get adequate insurance, and the fact that you have so much is invested into an event. From the talent to the toilets, as it were. And if those things are pulled away at the last minute, the risk is always, and the burden is always on the promoter. And so that, I think, there's a very unhealthy focus on how alone everybody is in the live sector versus the government support, or the absence of government support that's not really enabling it. We're even here in the Balearics, in Ibiza and Mallorca, there are test events taking place or just taking place, and whilst it could be deemed a success, there's no margin in those events. Those are loss leaders, and everybody knows how much cost and how big a throughput of people that you need at events for them to make money. And I don't think that kind of profit and that kind of margin is going to be there for those businesses for a while if the way that they're being constructed carries on.
Susan, Bart, anything you want to add there?
No, I agree. I mean, I'm not so deeply involved in the live part of the business and clubs. I mean, just from my own point of view, that's like, I wish they would be back sooner rather than later. And for me, as they were, is great. But I hear people obviously with the same worries that Mark just mentioned. It's like there's a lot of uncertainty and a lot of fear as well, and optimism, but mixed feelings.
And it seems also that there's a lot riding on the fall and events coming back September, October, November, later in the season. Do you still feel that sort of the support around that timeline, or do you feel things shifting as we sort of get into the summer?
I think it depends on if there are more, variants of the virus coming up. If we can continue the pace of getting people vaccinated that want to be, and having solid testing before an event, and all of this, then I see that some stuff can come back. But if there are any other variant like the Delta one right now, if there should be an additional one, of course, this is always the risk that is out there. And that makes it so difficult for everyone in the live sector to really go out and plan. Yes.
I mean, one of the things we kicked around way back in kind of March, April last year was understanding how the music industry or the live sector was going to change over the next few years. And our view was that you were going to have global, digital, and local physical, which is that there was going to be so much investment in kind of different digital models to consume live streams that you would almost be part of the audience, and that was how you could have certainty around live events, was for not to be physical events. And then the only way you could have certainty around health and to avoid visas being blocked or costs of flights or disruption and damage to your plans would be to only hold small physical events until the world was normal again, if it will be. So, and I think that's going to carry on. I think if you look around Europe and you look at Brexit politics around travel and flights and ambers and greens and how the US is opening, you just see, I think, for the next 12 to 24 months, that local physical strategy will be maintained. And there aren't that many DJs jumping on planes at the moment to travel around the world, taking the risk of a gig in Miami or Austin or further afield. So I think that will continue for a while.
Thank you, Mark. And we do have a question from the audience, from David, actually. He wants to know, in terms of live streams sort of remaining after shows open up, like how important do you think they're going to be? How sort of embedded are they going to be in sort of the standard structure of any given live event once things do open up again?
I think in many cases, particularly big festivals, they were already part of the package. I think people are so much more used to logging into them or actually looking at them. So I think that obviously is one of the things that happened in the last 18 months, sort of the sort of people getting used to live streams and actually enjoying them, hopefully. So I think there will still be part of the package. Obviously, what wasn't as widespread was this sort of virtual live streams that obviously is a fast growing and fast developing part of the market, which is very interesting. Still sort of settling down a bit, but I'm sure there's going to be big developments in that in the next 12 months for sure.
Yeah, and I think David has mentioned this in the report. There's always going to be a group of people that can't attend the actual events, whether, they can't travel there, can't afford the cost of travel, have kids at home, or, just don't want to go for that long out and rather tune in a little bit from home. There will always be the market. And, as Bart said, we started streaming bigger events before the pandemic hit. So this will definitely continue, so that, you can somehow be part of such a huge event that you normally can't travel to. And definitely what's super interesting for the next generation, especially, is when it comes to everything metaverse and interactive and stuff, because yes, that generation is definitely has fully adopted these kind of events already. So there's more to come.
Would you say that the metaverse is particularly exciting just because it sort of gives unlimited growth potential?
It seems to be like it's really, a place to hang out with, for the definitely the younger generation. So I still need to get used to it. And it seems just like normal, you'd be in there, you can, exchange a few things, you can spend money, you can, interact with each other, and it doesn't necessarily have to be the in real life, environment. So it's super interesting field. And as I said, I still need to adapt it myself, but what I've seen so far, it's incredible. There are things possible that haven't been possible before, and that's great.
And in terms of emerging technology, obviously we saw just the explosion of NFTs in the last few months. How important do you all think that NFTs are going to be as we move forward? Particularly given that we know that it's such a culture within the electronic music industry. Like so much of this content is coming from us.
I think they've got an important role to play because they've created an opportunity for unique pieces of art to be identified accurately and monetized accurately. But in terms of creating a scale NFT environment that replaces the current rights infrastructure, it's too early to tell. Everything's, if you want to sell music using an NFT, it still has to connect to the current rights infrastructure to monetize where all those current rights are exploited. So we're either at the beginning of a massive period of change, which would be exciting, or it's just a new entrant in the marketplace that has a particular role to play for relatively high value one-off transactions. And I just think it's too soon.
Yeah. I also think it's like relatively high value one-off transactions is one thing. It's like I think it's also underexploited or under-investigated yet as to like it could play a role in ticketing or in like sort of or in even like sort of lower. I mean that sort of $10 million for this or $15 million that I think is sort of just that's not gonna last or that's not gonna be the business. The business will probably be more like in 50,000 tickets for something, including piece of music or a piece of art, or it's like sort of on a slightly lower level of price.
I agree. I think you're going to see a conflation of all of the bits that we're talking about, like identification of music being used. You can achieve that through NFTs and blockchain, and within an immersive or virtual reality environment where you're already digital, you've got digital coins to buy digital things. I think we're at the beginning of seeing all of this come together. I think that the challenge at the moment is everything's sat in a separate box, and everything needs to come into the same marketplace so that you have your physical experience and your digital experience, and that digital experience can be monetized and tracked properly if everybody that wants to sort of invest into it and gain from it plays nicely in the sandpit.
I mean, that's fascinating. Does that, given what you guys do, is that concept exciting to you? Just sort of seeing all these pieces sort of finally coalesce in that way?
Definitely, but it's like, there is so much to do there and so much to investigate and so many opportunities to explore. And at the same time, obviously, my main sort of day, what I do mostly during the day is still try and develop artists and tracks and sign. It's like, so there are only sort of X amount of hours in the day that you can work. So it's like there's a lot to do, and it's almost like a tsunami of new opportunities that you can sort of think, whoa, what's going on here? While at the same time still trying to just do your job.
Right, absolutely.
You just want to read everything that sort of comes out on new opportunities, new markets, new platforms, new ideas. It's like that's almost your day gone, no? If you want to really follow that.
That's true. I guess we just have to trust there's someone in the metaverse working on these pieces for us.
Well, yeah.
But I know that the $100 million acquisition of David Guetta's catalog was obviously a big story, a big recent story. It's
not official though. It's like it's not communicated. But
I'm sorry.
The 100 million is just something that David puts in his presentation, but it was never announced.
I see. Okay. Well, we can say it was a big ticket acquisition.
Yeah.
What does an acquisition like that? Obviously, we also saw Calvin Harris sell his catalog. What do they say about the sort of legacy of dance music with these big artists in particular?
Well, to me, it just sort of says that someone like artists like Guetta and Calvin, stuff like there is a catalog there now that sort of goes back 20 years or even in some cases more. Is that it's grown up to be recognized as proper catalog, because in the same way that 10 years ago, 15 years ago, you would have never got this done because there were there would be too many people saying, we don't know if a dance record actually after 2 years it's still relevant, or after 4 years it's still relevant. And I think these sort of deals, and particularly also what Hypnosis is doing, sort of proves that is now that's over. That's like it's sort of part of our culture and heritage, and it's catalogued as any other rock or pop or I mean, and the same questions now are being asked about hip hop still. It's like, is it really catalogued? Does it keep being relevant? Is it just not of the moment? Is it not that one summer? And it turns out, or at least from my experience and from our research, is like it isn't. It's like an amazing dance track is forever.
Amen.
Exactly.
In terms of other success stories, Susan, of course, Beatport saw a significant growth this year, 33%. What was driving that? And did you guys sort of forecast it, or was it sort of more out of the blue?
So definitely what drove is that people were at home and wanted to listen to music, and finally had some time to really, go and dig in all the music that is available out there. Because as Bart said, time is quite often a constraint. And here, finally, people had the chance and say, look, I really want to, listen to this, build my playlists, build my my collection. And that definitely benefited us. So, the overall increase was a lot of new customers trying out our streaming product and staying. And in addition, the downloads increased as well. So it was forecasted for, but, we're of course really, really happy in which, to which extent this actually happened. But time helped. And innovative products as well. So being afraid of streaming or streaming into the DJ booth, we actually see it correlates positively with download sales.
And in terms of the sort of top genres, the top performing genres that you had, obviously techno has continued to dominate. We had house, we had tech house, drum and bass. Was there anything about that, top 5 or 10 that was, different or significant or sort of reflective of this year?
I mean, techno continued to be, number one 5 years. That's for sure. But because it's so popular in sets, and it's the amount of releases that are out there. So a huge community. So the single release itself perhaps did not do the massive amount of sales, but all together, techno stays strong. But we can definitely say house music is number 2, and let's see next year when we have the same discussion. I'm actually curious to see which genre will be number 1. And what is really, really great to see is the drum and bass community. So really being active on Beatport, and that's definitely a genre that was on the rise throughout the year. Yes.
Great, very exciting. So, as we wrap it up, I mean, I think that what we all noticed from the report is that there was a lot to be excited about and optimistic about, sort of in the wake of a year that perhaps, wouldn't have been anticipated to be that way. And so I would love to know sort of what each of you are sort of most excited about in the dance music space currently, and what we have to look forward to. Mark, do you want to start?
I think what I'm most optimistic and looking forward to, apart from the return of live, is just hearing in the correct and proper environment some of the most amazing music that's been recorded over the last 18 months. So not only seeing that amazing release from people thrilled to be back, but also the release from artists and producers and DJs unleashing tracks that have only been heard in headphones and with 2 other people in the studio or in a car or running, So I think that's, for me, that's the most exciting thing over the next 12 to 18 months, is just getting music back into the environment that it was made for. But also seeing what actually happens to so much of the innovation that's taken place in 2020 and early 21, and seeing where the homes to all of it, to the new technologies and the new concepts become. So I think there's a lot commercially that's going to happen over the next 12 to 18 months that would be really interesting to observe. And I think creatively, it would just be wonderful to hear music in its natural home.
Indeed. And I'm glad you brought that up, because there was a conversation I was having with someone who, was questioning whether the music that came out, let's say early in the pandemic, will still have a shelf life in clubs and at festivals. And you're saying that you think it will.
I think there's probably some classics coming, actually. I think there's been so much time and love spent on music in the last 18 months that I can't wait for not only the music that was released during 2020 to be on the dance floor, but also the music that we all know is yet to come and how that goes down. Because I think, as we said earlier on, I think there'll be more creative risks and more diversions from the norm over the releases over the next 6 to 9 months. I just think it's really exciting.
Indeed.
I think what you say, Mark, is like that for me. The most, or the what I'm most look forward to is that sort of, okay, you can listen to dance music and electronic music in digital ways, but for me, it's always been a very physical way of enjoying music. It's like it needs to be heard and experienced and actually felt in a club at 4 a.m. It's like sort of with the right sound system, and that's, I think, what the people I work with and that I've sort of got, that I have like daily interactions with, that's what we miss the most. And I think that coming back combined with, and I'm very looking forward to all those genres that Mark was mentioning that would come out of 18 months of experimenting, people experimenting in studios. I'd love to hear those as well. And like, to me, it's like whatever happens in the metaverse, it's like where that is going, and sort of be part of that and following that. And then the last bit is like, I really, really think or hope that at some stage we find a massive talent somewhere where nobody expects it to come from, and that is really desperately needed. And it's like we're all looking, and we're all sort of, have scouts everywhere and stuff like that. So, but it's like in the next, hopefully 12, 18 months, hopefully there's someone sort of fresh, new, from a territory that we least expected from, coming with amazing sounding new things.
Cool. I love that. Thank you.
I agree to everything which was said. And what I'm really excited about is that, the whole pandemic made everyone rethink a little bit now how the industry was before. It, of course, brought a few topics more to the surface. And I hope, and I'm really excited for that, we are now at a stage where, everyone currently is a bit more aware of certain issues, and I hope it will just continue to be this, and that it's not just awareness, but actually tackling things that are difficult in our industry. And I personally think we're at a good stage where we can really make big changes and really come out of this as a more healthy and probably better industry, if that's the right word to say. But I'm really excited about this and seeing what's happening on all these different aspects.
Fantastic. Thank you all for your insights. Is there anything that anyone would like to add before we wrap it up?
All good.
All good.
Okay. We're good. Okay. Well, thank you, everyone who's watched us today. Thank you, David, for the report. And we will see you next year. Until then, be well.
Thank you.